Are we live?
Are we live? Yeah.
Are we live?
That's a new one. That's a new one there. The first time Matt's hid behind his hands to start the week. Well, at least in
Welcome.
public.
When my son was little, when he used to play hide and go seek, that's how he used to hide. He used to like stand in the middle of the room and be like,
You know what's funny? I think everybody has had that moment of like, if I can't see them, they can't see me, right? Like that ostrich thinking. Like, but it's funny to see that there's such like a connection like that, especially like when you're seeing young kids. It's like, oh, they can't find me. It's like, well, you're,
how
you're
many
right.
how many businesses operate in that fashion?
That's a good point. Yeah, but a good point actually. And that's actually very cool. You don't even have to put up your brain food today.
Hold on to that brain food because there's some other topic brain food coming up. As always, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining another Wake Up and Deliver Season 2, Episode 20. As always, you have John and myself bringing you another, even on holidays in Canada, we bring you we ship the goods, as I said this morning. Brain food, as always, true generosity whispers in private, far from applauding crowds. I think John froze. That's not that's that's not John in his regular form. So I know we're having a little bit of technical difficulties. As always, as everything live on the internet, these things tend to happen. But actually, I'm going to screenshot that. Oh, he's gone. I was going to screenshot that because I thought that was pretty funny. As always, we have some good content to bring you today, and we're going to wait for John to come back because we had his thing was next, and I don't have my thing up and ready, but I'll get it prepped. We'll talk about some challenges that are happening in the marketplace. As always, one second. Yeah, well, some of the things that usually we talk about, John had to prep for last mile. We don't talk a lot about other things, but today actually we do talk about a lot of other things. But today we had some good ideas, and I wanted to wait for John to talk about them. But it's interesting to note, as the Mexican freight continues to increase cross border. A lot of companies are really focusing on Mexico freight into the United States, into Canada. One of the things that is on the rise has been talked a lot about is the theft rate that's been occurring, and it still is a problem. It was reported quite extensively last year, and continues to be a lot of problem this year. And a lot of companies are keeping it quiet too, and not reporting it to the level that they should be reporting it. And so we're seeing a rise, either on the rail or they're on trucking, coming from Mexico back into the United States and Canada. Something that affects a lot of that freight, because a lot of trucks wait at the border for this freight, and then it doesn't appear, and then the market is still relatively soft in the Canadian side. Actually, that's a good topic to kind of talk on my own. Is in the Canadian market, cross border, outbound from Canada into the United States has really softened. Rates have really decreased, at least on the refrigerated side. Oh, John's back. On the refrigerated side, it was I was trying to keep it together for the last couple minutes, and now this week you're blurry. Like you have my effect from last week. You're a little bit distorted.
I'll give it a second as everything's just kind of coming back. It should be fine. The power just kind of flashed here, so router's off, modem's off.
All the fancy stuff. Anyways, like I was saying, the market out of Canada going to the United States is a little bit soft on the trucking side, which I was just talking about while you were gone, and it has affected the ability for inbound as well. Because if you don't have trucks going out as often, a lot of the inbound rates have increased to compensate, but outbound is still very soft. I was just talking about Mexican freight too. The high theft recently that's been reporting coming out of Mexico, Mexican freight. It's been a challenge for a lot of companies. A lot of companies actually have come out and said they don't report majority of the thefts that do occur.
Well, have you seen one of these shows that's about like all around like sort of that part of the country that's talking about oil and stuff like that? I forget, Billy Bob Thornton's in it. You seen this one? I forget what it's called.
Oh, and he's like the enforcer for the oil companies and the cartels.
Yeah.
I've seen bits about it, but I haven't really seen it.
The funny thing in it, he's talking about how the cartels and all kinds of stuff around there. He's like, they steal stuff all the time. It's easier to not report it. We eventually get it back rather than trying to report it all the time.
Well, that's exactly like companies would just rather pay the customer and not report it than deal with the insurance and the hikes that's been occurring. But we did have a good brain thought before my brain thought. Did you even see my brain thought this morning, or did you freeze out?
I didn't. The power got me. So
It was a great reaction, though. Like you froze at the perfect moment.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
We'll bring it back to the stage. True generosity whispers in private, far from applauding crowds.
Yeah, I think that that's pretty solid. Like, you know what I mean? If anyone that just does anything, regardless if people know about it or not, I think is probably more true than the people who are like, oh, I want to donate X, Y, Z, or do this or do that, but want to also make sure there's a bit of a spectacle around it.
We moved past. I just put it up for you.
There you go. The moment
the moment was gone. What we were talking about before you lost power? You said we should come back to it after the brain food, and I've already seeped out of my brain. Hide and seek. That's what it was. Companies hiding behind and pretending like everything is fine, everything's great. Let's just.
Well, I mean, I think it's like kind of like the core concept of just like, hey, you know, my reality is kind of what I'm inferring on everyone else when, you know, like the hide and seek thing is just like a funny metaphor for it, because it's like, you know, like whatever you're doing, like isn't changing the reality for everyone else, what they're perceiving, what they're doing, or what they can or can't do. Like you're kind of only masking yourself or blinding yourself, right? And you know, when you made the comment about the companies, I think it's quite true. I think a lot of these companies, you know, we talk about things like inertia or, you know, being too slow to change or whatever, but the reality is because most of them just don't want to admit or accept the reality of their situation.
I'll bring back some good old Carleton philosophy for you. And for those who don't know, John and I actually went to the same school, but we didn't know each other. And we both worked at the same places while we were both in Ottawa, but we didn't know each other. Some political thought here. The cave.
You know, super random on that. I really wonder if one time I got one of your customers come in, or if one of my customers went to you, that was, you know, someone there was supposed to do my sale or vice versa, and you just like scoop me or something like that. Anyways,
who is this John guy? I'm gonna take his. Anyways, he's at Billings Bridge. Don't want this. South Keys all the way.
Anyways, random.
Anyways, what was I saying? You lost my train of thought. The cave allegory. You know, everybody's chained in there. Look at the cave, seeing the light from behind them. They think this is a reality. They get unchained. They get brought outside, and they're going, "Holy shit, this is reality. I can't take it. I need to go back to my perception of what reality is." I think is a fantastic analogy for a lot of companies. They're so focused. They got their blinders on, and I always said this to every company I worked at was, you know, based off the rate. Even when you read the rates online, it's a perceived rate. It's not the actual rate, because there's companies that could, you know, do it for a lot less or need a lot more for do it, but they will settle or they will ask for more based off their own relative needs, because where they are and what they need to make certain work done, right? And that's why market rates from between two lanes is a very much a battle of the averages, and it always does grind out someone else or grind someone else in if some of those positions change drastically, right? And I think a great example now is tariffs. Tariffs have decreased the amount of freight coming out of Canada. So the freight coming back into Canada obviously has to compensate an increase. So anybody who had RFQ that started earlier in the year with inbound is struggling a little bit, and vice versa. Same as container freight coming out of LA. It can be domestic USA as well. But now as we ramp up and all this freight is going to start jamming up the ports, it's going to be the exact same thing. It's going to be up and down. It's all over.
For sure. It's a good point though, because you and I have talked about and shared thoughts on pricing before. And I think after one of our conversations, I even wrote a post or something that's saying like, choosing the lowest rate isn't always bad, and it's most certainly not as bad as everyone always says. But I said that's also a very sort of like asterisk style comment, in the sense of like, you would really have to understand why. There's definitely a lot of situations where buying the lowest rate is probably not going to work out very well for you, right? Because it has a higher likelihood of indicating that the person is probably, either not sure what they're doing or hoping that something else will dramatically change. You know what I mean? But that being said, to your point, the concept of a rate, or that like X lane costs Y, is not really true, depending on, people's different, number of moves, their density in the lanes, their other activity that's going on. They don't have the same costs, or they don't have the same requirements. But before you would just take advantage of that, you really want to be sure, right? Which is why even I say to, like an e-commerce brand that's going to sign up with a 3PL, it's like, there could be reasons why they're offering you such a strong rate. Like, you know what I mean? Like this concept of blanket saying that like, oh, they're just going to be bad. You'll get what you pay for, is not always true.
I got a real world example.
Okay.
Straight out of Monarch Connect, just what I bring to the table.
There you go.
We have a customer that we do final mile deliveries in the GTA, right to the store. We help do all the setups for them. And we obviously have a provider that does a fantastic job. Provider a few weeks ago comes back up to me, goes, "Hey, Matt, the customer that I had that made this profitable for me just pulled all their freight. I have about 6 weeks before I have to figure it out, or we have to talk about what we're going to do." It's not that even if you can increase your rate, because you don't have enough volume
activity,
to make it make sense. And I'm like, ooh, that's not good. And we're locked in for based off of this scenario, because we were told that this is going to be good for X amount of time. We figured it would be, because they had the same perception. It's not a fault on them. And because their customer went to another provider because they got offered bottom rates. And I'm like, you know what? Take a minute. Let's evaluate it after a few weeks, because there's always that happens when someone takes a very bottom rate freight and they agree to that activity. They sometimes revert back quite quickly. We'll know in a few weeks. Lo and behold, a couple days ago, they came back and said everything's fine. The customer came back. They even got an increase on their freight, and everything is tickety boo great. But that kind of thing does affect how your whole ecosystem works, right?
Yeah.
One position of one carrier, one position, you might have a few of them, but if that activity for those carriers goes away, it really affects how they operate into that area and how profitable they are.
Well, yeah, and now before we get everyone sort of like confused, being like, "Why you're saying different things?" Like, see, he had to come back because of the low rate. Here's why that is often true, or the likely scenario that you see play out, because people who really understand, their activity base and their customer base and what really moves the needle on their costs, and then what they need to charge, will very rarely discount to that point, because they understand, like Matt and I are talking about, that a lot of things can change, and that they have to be careful about how many commitments they have out there that are really priced in a extremely advantageous way. So if I were doing pricing, I might be able to do it, let's just say, an activity for $10 an interaction. But if I know that that's normally a $25 interaction, I'm going to be very mindful about giving the 10, and how many times I do it, into how many customers and how many situations, just because of what Matt said there. Things can change. So that's the reason why you often don't see more established or more professional service providers doing that, is because they know that it's the less experienced ones, or the desperate ones, that typically have to go for that bell and take the higher risks, right? So it's a really mixed bag of activity and trust, and really understanding what's going on and why. But I can definitely tell you that I've been on the back end of doing pricing for organizations and stuff like that, where it was extremely intentional about pricing it at the $10 for the $25 touch, for example, and having very detailed, sort of what if. Okay, well, we're going to offer this. How long is it going to last? What happens if? How do we sustain it? When? Blah blah blah. So you can definitely do it. but it's much more rare to have it done properly than not.
That's the key right there. I think I haven't been asked too often on many quotes that I have done is why is your price A this high? Why is your price B on point, or why is your price C so low? There hasn't been an in-depth conversation about that. Typically, it's usually this is the price I need. Can you match it? Can you go below it? And there's no like, hey, what is the health of your system to help sustain this freight? Or on vice versa, I don't have that conversation with a lot of the customers going, hey, what's the health of this freight? That if I do win this RFQ, what is the likelihood I will have this sustained volume from when you say? Because often it happens is, big win, you get a 50 lanes a week from a customer, and you get all prepped up, and you build other business on top of that 50, and all of a sudden it's supposed to start, and they're like, yeah, no, it's production is low. We're probably not going to see this for 3 months. You might see a quarter of what you want in the contract, but we just keep everything the same because of XYZ. And then you've built other business based off that business that didn't materialize, and a lot of your freight now is in jeopardy because you overcompensated.
Yeah, well, I mean that's why I think you have to be really honestly, I'll tell you straight up, I've never taken the data from an RFP as cash, like never. Like I've always hedged against it because the reality is most people put in extremely optimal things, or at minimum, the majority of customers don't track in a day-to-day, week-to-week level the true plan versus modifications versus ad hoc stuff versus whatever that came up. So I almost never, like, even so, one of the last things I did before leaving the food industry was kind of setting up a huge RFP and this and that, and like everything, like I actually made sure the team turned it down, but that was because of the fact that I didn't want to get into these conversations after the fact, right? Like in the sense of whatever. So we kind of created this concept of like likely volume, like sort of more like your minimum plan that I need you to be able to cover. And then there was some upper thresholds for some of the bigger lanes to understand how much they could flex.
Yeah. And how many vendors that you had on your list, specific to maybe 3PLs or even assets, even though you put it like an extraordinary amount of freight, would always put that can cover 100% of it? Like I know what I've done this mistake often, and I've changed that tactic recently. Where if it's big customer I'm coming at, and they go, here's 10,000 lanes, how many of them can you do? Oh, I can do 100% of them. And when you kind of reevaluate that, when they look at you and they look at your size and they look at your capabilities, just even at a top glance, they're like, you're not even close to the size to be able to accomplish that. So if you're not being truthful in this process, and I wonder if a lot of these shippers, maybe you can answer that, a lot of these shippers really look at that. Would you give more weight to someone who said, out of your 10,000 lanes, I can maybe do 10%, and I can do it fantastically? And
I would tell people straight up not to do that. And I mean, I got, I remember the director at the time that was helping with like strategic sourcing, and they're like, well, you can't tell them not to bid. And I'm like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I expect them to bid only where they feel extremely confident and very strong. And on more than one occasion, I've had people come back with this, like, the 100% hero. And I've just said, like, listen, I'm not interested in you subcontracting it 6 times. I'm not interested in this and this. Like, you need to really tell me where you're really strong, either in your own network or whatever, and what becomes more your partnerships or whatever you want to call it. And I push them back, but that's because I don't want to get burned, right? By, you're contracting with like Dave, and you find out it's like, well, he contracted it to Bob, who's got a partner network with Steve, who then is working with Ralph. It's like, no, not interested in that.
Anyways, John, you had some bombshells to drop on me this morning.
I did. I had a funny one that
let me hear it.
I brought up. So I actually saw this the other day, and I thought it was a joke. I had to like fact check it a little bit. So how do you think about this? And it kind of goes into our comments about, people having the blinders on, but Tesla now has got a new market segment they are eyeing. They are looking to get into restaurant and last mile package delivery. And they're going to do it
With the robo
using the excess capacity of this up and coming robo taxi network they're trying to build. So, what are your thoughts there? Because to me, I think that this is very telling for the way a lot of these large organizations continue to operate. Um, and there's a number of like sort of, let's call it like pros and cons and challenges, but at minimum, very disruptive in my opinion if they're able to actually do it properly and in a way that makes sense.
One thing, biggest hurdle that I see off the top of my head, and I talk to this with my buddy Mike all the time, is you're changing a behavior there. And what the biggest behavior that you're changing is the person at the restaurant has to stop his workflow to put the food into the truck. So currently, someone walks and picks it up and goes. There's less disruption. They can have it to the side. Their name is there. This is your pickup. They click it, they touch it, and it moves on. The moment that you change that behavior to the person having to go outside because a Cybertruck or a Tesla has pulled up, and who's in charge of load securement, even to that smallest detail, and are they taking pictures? Is there going to be cameras inside to see how they secured the load, and who's responsible of it arriving properly on time, right?
Well, so but you're making an assumption already.
Why?
Well, you're assuming it's that the only autonomous part about this setup is the car.
Oh, you're talking about the robot coming out and grabbing the food.
Optimus robots. The idea is that these things will also have Optimus robots in them to do the last few feet and I'm assuming to your point then maybe doing the pickup or whatever.
That makes it far more interesting. That makes it a unique position for sure.
But imagine like the world that we're getting to where it's making more sense for these companies to have the highest technology vehicles that we've ever made, essentially, for at least consumer activity, to have robots, okay, using then back-end systems that are the apex of a lot of our technology to deliver happy meals. I honestly do agree that this is going to be the biggest challenge that they do face, and this is honestly one of the biggest problems that like delivery networks have and gig work networks have, is that they don't stack their gains and they don't optimize, like they don't drive for utilization. And this is what the biggest disruption of this is. Like, you know, whether you're Amazon or your FedEx, your USPS, Canada Post, or whoever, everybody continues to run the same system of like running the densest they possibly can for like, you know, an 8 to 10 hour period a lot of the time. Whereas these guys are like, I'm going to have my core business be taxis. Well, we all know that there's surges with those and then there's valleys. And then understanding the fact that they're going to use the valleys as the real capacity to do a lot of this work. You know what I mean? And that's just something that these other companies, DoorDash, Uber, none of them do. They just hit surges and then hope that there's just enough trickle in activity in the other hours to kind of make it still make sense.
I mean, I go back to my original comment I made months ago. Like when was the number is something high, like 60% of all North Americans have one way or another are working logistics. And if you automate all of that, who in the end is buying these McDonald's if they can't afford it? So I can see this working in places where like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Norway, who have these giant investment firms, country level, that give back to their citizens, where they have like a basic social network that they don't need as much. But in North America, where it's the hustler culture, where everybody has to make their own dollar, and it's not reinvested back into the system, it makes it far more difficult to see who's going to be consuming all this stuff if they don't have the means to be able to consume it. And we see that struggle right now, right?
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting too that like the real I'll say like attack, but in like, you know, quotes a little bit, but it's coming on like the low side of labor, right? Where it's like it almost used to not make sense to target the person making a minimum wage. But now, because that's so challenging and it's so disruptive or whatever, and these companies want to operate nonstop, um, that becomes the highest pain point when you think of like, hey, it's not reliable, it's not consistent. I can do more. Like they're focusing on that. I actually saw for the first time another interesting thing, and this is from Amazon, and I give them credit because Amazon has been the most sneaky service provider, but
Sneaky.
just, yeah, sneaky, just dropping new features without making like a big splash, but just incorporating it. So I bought a few things over the last few days, and on one of the deliveries, it caught my attention that I could receive it overnight. Now, this type of service is actually really big in Korea, really big in China, right? Like essentially ordering your product and having it for your morning, like before you leave for work or whatever. Amazon was now offering a delivery between 4 and 8 a.m.
Yeah, because Porsche pirates are less active at that time of
Oh, but
day.
it's not even,
That's true.
it,
But
it is, but I mean, okay, so one of the biggest things in like a lot of the work that I've done with people is to try to create more deliveries when people are home. I really think that like gig networks, especially, and a lot of these delivery providers are missing the boat big time by kind of trying to replicate these full day, like high density, like long delivery routes. Your biggest advantage, if you have completely flexible labor, should be to do what those networks can't, which is more simultaneous activity, means more people at the same time over a shorter period.
I think that the challenge that most companies have is wrapping their head around a non-traditional workflow, meaning
Yeah.
you have to work consecutively for 8 hours, right? Imagine a gig worker that can work 8 hours, but it's in spurts of 3-4 hours at a time. Has 8 hours off, another 3-4 hours later on, and it completes his day that way versus continuously 8 hours.
Well,
Um,
but there's, it's not just the companies. I mean, I think realistically, there's
and
a lot
people,
of, yeah, people themselves don't want to have that kind of like disruption to what they would say is like the work-life balance. Like I put out a big thing on the Canada Post situation. That's, we'll see how this week goes. But honestly, the demands by the union from Canada Post are impossible. They're absolutely impossible to sustain. And this concept of having defined routes over 8-hour shifts from yearly annualized volume, it's absurd. And it's so far out of context, like, or a context and contact with the way that the world really is. The only credit I give to Canada Post management is that they've held the line to say no because they know how stupid it is.
and we're gonna segue that into
There you go.
this is a generic brand video.
Well, but okay, so but just before we play this is, this was the concept, and you did a great post on this a couple of weeks ago. I was so disappointed that thing didn't like take off because you did something very similar. Maybe just share about it quickly, about
I,
what you did.
I forget what I did. I just did a very generic post. How what was it
Well,
even?
it was on logistics though. It was like as you're a logistics provider, so you kind of took like this concept that came out a few weeks after. So they probably felt inspired by
Oh,
your content.
The LinkedIn video that's so very generic that
Yeah,
I took an AI. I remember now. Thanks. I generated an AI video that was the most generic video of how to promote yourself as a 3PL,
yeah,
and it looked like majority of the 3PL videos that are out there.
for sure. And this one is
Maybe I'll
kind
bring that
of,
up.
yeah, bring that up while you're looking. I'll kind of share this one though. Is kind of very similar in the sense that, the premise is that, AI and all of these tools are huge enablers, but then at the same time they have such a disastrous potential impact on your brand, because now all of a sudden you lose all of your brand recognition, your worth, and whatever, when you're like essentially just making content with the same filters, the same presets, like the same approach that all of these models and sort of engines are trained on. And it's saying like, what's your real brand? Like, here's Matt's. I loved it actually. I thought it was so good. I saw it and I was like, amazing.
I forgot about this. This is how often I post on online now. But anyways, it's very true to the point of what you see nowadays. And this is all AI generated, by the way. Like I did
Yeah.
nothing. It took me 30 seconds to create this video, and it was an idea John and I were just kind of chatting about, and that's how easy it is to make these videos. And this is
Yeah.
what you see.
And I would say, actually, this is going to be super good then just to play the other one, because I think there's going to be a lot of funny things that we can just talk over. But so the quality, though, let's just take away kind of like the blah, whatever, like the quality, the transitions, kind of consistency. Like if you put a little bit of effort to have a quote unquote brand like image or whatever, all works, right? It's kind of got good timing. It's got the right kind of movements, like all of the psychology and this and that. And you should actually listen.
Attention.
Yeah, you should go and listen to this. Make sure you put it in the comments, because the funny thing with this is listening to the script that Matt had on top of it, which was also like an AI kind of generated thing. But it was so funny. So flip back over to that other one and just look at this one now. So this is to my point about if you're using the same thing as everyone else, right? You end up getting all of this same kind of stuff. So this one's doing something very similar. So I would encourage you to like check this one out too. But all of the same concepts, right? These transitions, these shots that are kind of metaphors, different people trying to create situations that, oh, it's innovative. Oh, it's communal. Oh, it's something I relate to. It's all of these funny things, right? But this is like these engines are continually built on these same concepts, which means, are you really going to stand out if this is your work effort and the way you're trying to connect with everyone else? Because how many of these videos are people going to see before they mean absolutely nothing?
They already mean nothing to a lot of people.
I would say that, yeah, they're probably not very deep, but I mean, I still think you can probably catch people's attention with like a higher quality video, but like that's going to start to drop off almost instantly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think when people, and I've talked about this with Kat too, when people start being themselves and authentic, it's going to start resonating more. But before, it was like the 90s and early 2000s, it was about being the same as everybody else. We're all part of one culture. Now it's more about how authentic can you be, and this is not authentic anymore. This AI piece is so far from being authentic. It's people are just being turned off by it. And that's why I think the rise of meeting people in person. Did you see that sludge they were filling in there? That was supposed to be coffee.
Yeah, it's just absurd, man. I'm gonna put the other one. Oh, it's not working. I'm gonna have to do it a different way. LinkedIn's giving me like a double link. I wanted to put this one in there so everyone can kind of see it too. Let's see if it works this way. Yeah, but that's gonna work.
But the authenticity of anything that you do, it should be there. Like we just talked about earlier, the I can do everything. I don't think is that. Be authentic with yourself. Hey, I have limitations. These are my limitations. This is what I can do, but I can do it great. I am great at these things. This is my niche, but I can't do everything.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I think that this kind of stuff is just really gonna. It's honestly like people are going to put all kinds of like they're going to get all their SaaS subscriptions, get little people playing with it and whatever, and it's just going to mean nothing. So, anyways, I thought that was kind of funny. So you're kind of seeing where all of these like different technologies are going. I mean, you've got companies like Tesla using crazy things to to deliver the lowest value goods potentially, and then on the flip side, you've got platform after platform that's going to help you fall more into the background and be less kind of talked about than anything else. I think it's such a weird like divergence of opportunity or whatever.
Absolutely. On that note, we're 5 minutes over, John.
We broke
our rule, but we had some cool things at the end there because we went off topic because we have no topics. Everything is off topic.
That's right.
And on that note, thank you everybody for joining us as again on this holiday and non-holiday. Next week will be the American holiday. And join us next week, as always, on the same dock, same appointment time, same appointment location for Wake Up and Deliver.
Unloading the goods.
Way to drop the bomb at the end.